Japanese knitting machines generally rely on a strip of sponge to keep the needles firmly set in their path. That's true of the hobby machines as well, and it's true on this KX350. All of the sponges wear out from time to time. Changing a sponge bar is a simple matter, but changing a simple sponge strip of the kind used in the KX350 requires a little more attention. Let's put a fresh one in my new machine so you can see how it works. This is my new KX350. Nice, huh? And it truly might be nearly new, but whether it was used much or not, it was manufactured many years ago. This is labeled Home Knitter KX350 Brother, made in Japan. Now, before I even attempt to use it, I know I need to change the sponge bar. And this is how I know. Actually, I said sponge bar, but it's a sponge strip in this machine, like this one. Happily, you can still get these at spongebar.com, and also on eBay, a seller named Leanne Co. has them. Use the right stuff if you can get it. Saves a world of trouble. See that jiggliness and floppiness of the needles, and they'll actually fall out. I had them do so when I turned it upside down. That should not be the case. If there is no sponge strip in it, or a worn out one, it'll do that though. And I'm not going to attempt to knit with it, because doing so could cause the needles to jam and damage the carriage. Right there, just look between the needles where my thumb's running along. See that pretty clean beige strip? That is part of the old sponge strip. It's not stained, so it doesn't look like the machine was ever used much, and you'd think, well, in good condition then, I should be able to use it. But you cannot. Can you see in there? You're looking at some discolored, yellow mustard color to brown color fuzz. That's what's left of the sponge that should resemble this. Plainly, it is not going to do its job. I must change it, and there are two approaches that people take. I'm going to use the hard one for a good reason. Sometimes people get a hold of this one end and they sew the new one to it through its end, and they pull it through. But because this machine is brand new to me, I'm going to take the needles out, take the old strip out, get a good look at it, clean up any of that nasty yellow debris that might have fallen in the channel, lubricate it with silicone, and do it right from the get-go so that I can enjoy it without further ado for some time. I'm taking all the needles out to give myself better access. Here they've been removed, and you can see what I noticed before better now. You can see marks where pressure from the needles imprinted itself on the sponge, but you don't see any staining, which is very good. Over here, the needles are still in place. Here's how to get them out. With the machine right side up, bring them forward, flip the latches closed, and then pull them out. This sponge is in such terrible shape I can pull them out two at a time with great ease. Close the latch, pull it out. Close the latch, pull it out. Go across the bed like that if you, as I do, want to get all the needles out. Here's another view of me pulling them out. Flip the latches closed, grab some needle butts, and lift as you pull out. I'm getting closer to you so you'll see better and better. See, straight back, and of course they just bump into the rail again. Close the latches, lift and pull. Close the latches, lift and pull. Close the latches, lift. And as I lift, this very back end comes up over this. That's what you're aiming for. Most of my needles were in A1 condition. This is one exception. It's a real puzzler. It is rusted, and it was rusted in the open position. So I had to use another tool to pry the latch away from that rusted shank and press it closed. I don't know if this one will be salvageable, but you do not want to try to force it out with the latch open. It came out, and if I were unable to get others, I do think that with some emery cloth and some oil, I could possibly make this one knit. I probably won't have to, because happily needles still are available for this machine. Obviously, at some point in its long career, this was dripped on probably, and the moisture sat there long enough to do this harm. Next step for me is to remove this old sponge strip completely. Here it is emerging. So I just am going to get a hold of it and start tugging. Remember that some people prefer now to sew the new to the old and pull it through, but I want to be able to examine the whole channel and clean it if necessary. So here we go. It's not proving too difficult, but I'm afraid I could be leaving disgusting residue behind. I can feel the stickiness. And yes, at least some places I did. It's going to be hard for you to see in there, but if you see a dark spot there and some there, I think you are able to see some debris was left behind. So now we're going to use one of Jack's favorite products. So here's a good look at some debris. See in there? Don't want that to stay in there. Next, I'm going to use Jack's LPS one. Don't tell him, please. And I'm going to squirt it all into that channel. Stand this up on the absorbent mats, so you're not going to be able to see everything I'm doing. But I'm going to go ahead and just rinse it down. Alright, I've done most of the washing, but I'm going to try to slant this so you can see the foam coming down, washing the crud behind it, which has worked pretty well. And now all my crud is down in this area, which you will not be able to see me fish it out, but I'll use a little absorbent stuff and the dental tool and pick it out and dry it out. Okay, all cleaned out with this one, LPS 1. Now Jack has instructed me that the other LPS food grade, listed as H1 on the label, so that's not confusing, is it? They both have LPS, they both have 1, but this one is food grade H1. This is the more strong stay with it lubricant. The first one that I used is the more cleansing, although they both do both. So before I try to insert the new sponge in the channel, I'm going to spray the channel with the more durable lubricant. Other very experienced knitters have told me that this step is a total pain in the rear. And Jack has told me that the lubricant ahead of it will help considerably. So here I go, right in front of your eyes, trying the hard part. There are other machines that have similar setups as this one, but this is the only one where you have to go progressively through all these supports. A lot of them, like the KX350, you can take out all the needles, then plop in the sponge, and then put the needles back, which is some work, but not like this. So far, I have been under one of the bars. Of course, we don't want to peel the covers off of the sponge. So I'm tucking both of them in, pulling them both beneath every support bar, and then grabbing a hold of them with fingertips while easing along at the same time. I don't want to tear my sponge. Oh, by the way, I had instructions to put the dark side of this particular one up where the needles would go across it and the light side down. So that's what I'm doing, but this is my first experience. And my lovely assistant, Jack, just came into the room and handed me these. He thinks it may be easier to manipulate with them. So let's see if that's true.
They'll be easier to grab those tips with those rather than your fingers.
Well, I don't want to tear them, but they may be excellent for working it beneath. I think the way to look at this job is that it's going to be painstaking. Don't expect to whip it out and whip it in like you do a sponge bar. But this is our opportunity to get really comfortable with the works of the machine and give them a full inspection. I think it would bore you silly to watch me go under all 20 or so of these supports, but this method is working, so I'm going to do the rest of it off camera and see you shortly. In the background, Jack is still threading sponge through, but I wanted to show you before he gets very far. Old sponge in my right hand, new sponge in my left hand. You can see why, if this is necessary, this won't do, can't you? Some of these supports can be massively in the way of what you're trying to do. So Jack just took this one off from me, and now he's taking the next one off, and they can go back on. They come off with a simple series of screws. However, this is a spring-loaded clamp holder as well as a machine brace, so be careful with it as you take it off. I think this is very clever. This is the first machine I've ever had where the clamp was built in so that you couldn't lose it. I'm going to try to get a picture for you of what we have to do here without getting my hands in the way. We have to create some slack at this back end and work it all the way along, inchworm-like. Because if I simply go, now that I'm down near the middle, and tug, I'm just going to tear my sponge. It's obvious from the pressure that you feel that that'll happen. So we have to inch it in down here and push it along under each support. Now, I have it from very experienced knitters that this is very tedious and worrisome, and I am finding it tedious, but mine is sliding better than it has been reported, and I'm crediting the lubrication with silicone for that. If you have not seen Jack's videos on these products and why he's chosen them before, please watch them, because there are a lot of products that say in huge letters silicone, and in small print also petroleum distillates, causes brain cancer, causes instant stupidity, etc. These are just silicone and propellant, as I understand it. They are definitely safer for the machine than other products that may seem to be similar, and he spent a decade researching them, so these are the ones we go with.
Try this.
Okay, you knew we could count on Jack for an improvement. He just made me, and I am trying out this tool as a scruncher rather than the single point transfer tool that I was using. And while I continue to scrunch, I'll let him explain it to you.
All right, what this is a piece of aluminum wire normally used to hook your chain link fence to the crossbars. I have found these little guys come in real handy. Because they're malleable, you can bend them with your hands, but it's still a nice smooth aluminum surface. So what I did was, I took my trusty needle nose pliers, my extra hands, and I closed this shut, not by squeezing at the top, but squeezing near the open end where the loose piece was. And there you have a nice little tool that is rounded and flat and smooth on this end and a little narrower back here. Now, in order to be able to push down and push it and hold down the foam and push it at the same time, if you'll notice I put a little bend in it right there where the end is. Now I'll go to the other end, straighten out my demonstration, and watch what I'm doing. I pick a nice long spot, and then I'm just slowly curling this around a little bit at a time, and you'll see why in a second when I get it around a little bit. And a little thumb and forefinger action, and Now you've got a nice handle to hold, to work it with. While you're not looking, I'm straightening it out because it has to look a certain way.
He is so fussy about tools.
But now, here's the same thing we just handed Catherine. Nice round grip for you to hold. Get a little leverage on. This curve is to get you, right here, is to get your finger underneath so you can push down, push forward. You can do it. It's just a small piece of aluminum wire, but I like this. Aluminum reacts quite well to silicon. Kind of like the two go together.
I will say that this blunter end, as opposed to my transfer tool, I'm feeling that I am getting a little more force, but with less danger to the sponge.
That was my thinking. There is a point on that tool you were using.
Not really a point, but closer than this is anyway.
The point being, we don't want a point at all.
At this point, I'm more than halfway through, and in order to protect the integrity of the bed and not flex it carelessly, we've decided to bring all of the slack up to this end, let Jack put these supports back on for me, then take off the second batch and proceed from there.
And here we are. Golly, what did I do? I snatched them off, and now I can't remember how they go back on.
You always do that.
I know, but now this is why this is me and not you. If the camera can follow me down here, this one ought to go on just like that one. We have posts that stick through, and there's spots for the screws.
And as you said a moment ago, the left and the right one are mirror images of one another?
Yes, yes.
Okay. If there were any problems with these needles, while they're out here in a pile would be my moment to deal with those problems. But there aren't any. You saw that one rusted one, and I'm just going to replace it. These don't need soaking. They don't need hand cleaning or toothbrushing or any of the things we might do. I don't feel any irregularities or roughness that would indicate that a wipe down with an emery cloth would help. So all I'm going to do is just put them back in the machine as soon as I have the sponge back in and give the whole needle bed a squirt with the silicone lubricant. And a note I happened to notice, I read the manual, which I know seems like a strange thing to do, but it says use only the silicone oil on your machine. Well, in English, in America, silicone oil actually doesn't mean anything because we use oil generally to mean something that either came from petroleum or a vegetable source. And there's nothing that is sold under the name silicone oil. But Jack and I think that they were talking about silicone lubricant, that it's a translation probably from the original Japanese. So as long as you use a pure silicone product, such as the ones we prefer, you should be in good shape. You do not want petroleum distillates on a plastic bed machine. Am I right, Jack?
That is absolutely correct.
Now, my near braces are reinstalled. My far braces have been removed, and on I go, inserting. And it's in. There's a little bit left over at each end, and my instructions are to go ahead and leave that there. Don't try to shorten it or pull it out, because we may want it later when changing the next time. Okay, here are the needles going back into the machine. Jack has got the machine on his lap, turned with one end sitting on a leg, and I am on the other side holding the camera. He's working where he can't see the first part of what he does, but this seems to be the method that most people have found easiest, and we've both tried it and agree it's not that bad. So I'll show you this for a minute, then I'll go around from the side you can see, and you'll see what else is happening.
And see where you can see the needle coming through right there?
Yep.
Then the minute it gets to
Yep, you can see the silver flash as it rotates.
right.
Then we're pressing it down with a thumb or finger, pressing the needle and the sponge
But
so
see,
as to rotate
see,
it.
There's the light. See where the needle right there is coming out. And the minute it gets to where the hook will go in,
We press it down,
yep,
push it forward, and then it pops back a little bit towards the back of the bed to line up. You do hear a little pop.
And again, you can see if you're in the right track.
That's it. This sounds difficult, and it looks hard at first. The first few will feel very, very awkward. After that, you pick up steam. It's really not that difficult.
Not really.
Let's watch one more, and then we'll finish this up off camera. Beautiful shot there. And here we are, less than an hour and a half since opening the box, and the new sponge is in. All the needles are back in, and let's see if it's going to knit nicely. It's a good sign. The needle's in the all the way forward position, knitted back to working position. And note, there's now no bounce. I would have to press them up hard to get them to come up. They don't jiggle, they don't clack. That's how they ought to be.